Alright, so today we're going to talk about finding the area of rectangular prisms. So there's many different kinds of prisms, but today we're going to just focus on first finding the area of all rectangle prisms. Okay, so 8.2a is what we will call this, the area of rectangular prisms. Alright, so as a part of these notes, first I would like you to do the best you can to draw a rectangular prism. Okay, so we're going to start with a rectangle that is standing up on its end, or up on its side. Okay, so it's a little bit taller. Diagonal lines off of 3 of the corners. Remember, you want the one in the middle to be the longest line, and then you drop it straight down to connect to that point, and this one is a line that connects straight over to our longest line. Okay, and don't forget, you might want to draw a dotted line back here that kind of shows the rest of the shape that we can't see. Alright, so this is our rectangular prism. We're going to give it dimensions. Okay, let's say that the width of my base, okay, my base is going to be the bottom here. So the width of my base will be 5, the length will be 8, and my height of my rectangular prism will be 6. Okay, so the first thing is when we find the surface area, sorry, I should have made that clear, the surface area of rectangular prisms, we are only finding the area of the surfaces of this figure. We're not finding the volume, which is everything on the inside. So because we're only finding the surface area, that is a two-dimensional measurement. We're just like when we found the area of shapes before, we are just finding the area of the surfaces, the flat surfaces. So I want you first to imagine that we are going to cut and unfold this rectangular prism, kind of like we did the other day. And so it would give us a shape that looked kind of like this. We would have a piece like this. Okay, then we would have an even longer one here. Okay, then another little bit shorter one, and then another longer one. Okay, and off of our two sides we would have our big fat side here and another big fat side here. So this is kind of what it would look like. Let's outline the different pieces with different colors to help you to see the differences of each side. Okay, so our base is this section right here, which I hope you recognize is identical to this section here. Okay, so that matches up with this is our base, and this one is identical to our base, it's just on top. Okay, then we have our front and back, okay, right here and right here, which should be identical. Okay, they may or may not look identical because of our drawings, but they are identical. Okay, so that is this piece here and this piece here. And finally we have our two sides. Okay, so our two sides are going to be this fatter piece on this side and this fatter piece over on this side. Okay, so that is represented over here with this piece and this piece. So if you notice, when we unfolded our rectangular prism, we have two of each side, two identical pieces of each side. And now that we have unfolded it, all of these surfaces are flat. So it's no longer a three-dimensional figure. And so since we are just finding the surface area, this essentially just becomes another composite shape. The last chapter, we talked all about finding the area of shapes and even composite shapes. So this is essentially a composite shape that's already been broken up into pieces for you. And now all you have to do is find the surface area or the area of each of these shapes and add them all together. Okay, so we're going to make a formula that represents that same idea. So we're going to say that SA for surface area, capital S, capital A, equals, okay, because there are two of each of these sides, we are going to say first 2 times, then in parentheses, we're going to have the area formula for each of our shapes. Okay, so first we're going to have our base, okay, this one right here, which is going to be our length times width, okay, because these are all rectangles. So length times width, so we get 8 times 5 plus, okay, now we need, so this one would also be length times width. This one here on our two ends is going to be the area of our width and height. If you look where it is on our shape, okay, this is going to be our width times height. So we're going to say this will be 5 times 6, okay, width times height. This would also be width times height, plus our last combination that we have not used is going to be for our two sides, which is represented by the length times the height. Length times height. So this would be our length times our height. Okay, so length times height, length times height. All right, so if we have length times height here, we would have 8 times 6. So now all you have to do is, order of operations would tell us that we're going to multiply first inside parentheses. So surface area equals 2 times, so then 8 times 5 is 40, plus 5 times 6 is 30, plus 8 times 6 is 48. Let's add all those pieces together. Okay, 40 plus 30 is 70, plus 48 would be 118. Times 2, so surface area equals 118 times 2. Well, let's do that math. 118 times 2 would give us, 8 times 2 is 16, 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, and 2 times 1 is 2. So 236. Surface area equals 236 units. This is going to be squared because remember, we're only finding the surface area, which is two-dimensional shapes, and then we are adding all of the surface areas together of all of my flat surfaces. Okay, so remember, essentially, we are only finding the two-dimensional area. Each side of this rectangular prism has two identical faces. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, if we just remember that the order in which we put our formula does not matter. Okay, the only thing that matters is that you use every combination of these three numbers that you could possibly use. So as long as you have 8 times 5, a 5 times 6, and an 8 times 6. Okay, so use the two bottom numbers, then use the one bottom number times the height, and then use the other bottom number times the height. Okay, as long as you have all three combinations and you remember to multiply them by 2 because there are 2 of each face, then you will be just fine. Okay, so what I would like you to do is on the board, there is a sample problem. I have labeled the 3 faces, okay, the lengths of the 3 dimensions. You have your width, your length, and your height. So all you need to do is simply plug in the formula, use the formula that we have talked about here. I'll even put letters that you might want to add to your formula here. So length times width plus width times height plus length times height. Okay, so you're going to take those numbers, you're going to plug them into the formula and see if you can find the surface area of that rectangular prism. And then we will talk about it together as a class.